The world begins long before the world begins. That is the paradox that has fascinated humanity for thousands of years, a question whispered across deserts and carved into ancient stone. Imagine a time before light, before land, before even the faintest breath of wind. A time when there was nothing to touch, nothing to see, and nothing to dream about. Only an endless ocean of darkness, silent and eternal. This is the realm where the story of Ra begins. And as we unfold this ancient Egyptian myth, you will find that it is not just the story of how the world came to be, but the story of how meaning itself enters existence. A tale of power, of fragility, of creation and destruction, and of the sun that still rises every morning because of a god who once chose to rise. Before there was Egypt, before the sands were golden and the Nile carved its path through the earth, there existed only the primordial waters. They were called none, an infinite expanse stretching in every direction, for there was no direction yet. No sky above it, no earth below it, no horizon to define its edges. It was chaos, but not chaos in the way you might imagine storms or destruction. This was a quiet chaos, a shapeless potential waiting for something to awaken it. A vast canvas without color or texture, ready for the first stroke. And then, from these waters, a spark of intention emerged. A will, a consciousness, something that desired to separate itself from nothingness. That spark would become Ra, the first god, the self-created one, the sun that would illuminate the world for all time. His creation was not an accident. It was a deliberate act, a moment where the universe decided to begin. Ra rose from the waters not as a fully formed figure but as a presence glowing with untapped brilliance. At first, he was alone, aware only of the endless darkness around him, aware that he was the only thing within it. In that solitude, he began to understand both his power and his purpose. He felt warmth building within him, a warmth that yearned to expand outward. That warmth was light, the very first light, and as it grew, it demanded to be released. In that moment, Ra willed himself into a form that could hold this light. He shaped himself into a radiant being, crowned with the brilliance of the rising sun. His golden glow cut through the void, pushing back the darkness of none. And as the first rays spilled outward, something extraordinary happened. The waters shimmered. The silence stirred. Creation responded. The light did not simply brighten the darkness. It transformed it. The first moment of illumination began to divide the undefined from the defined. Where Ra's light touched the surface of the waters, the idea of space began to form. Where his warmth penetrated the cool stillness, the concept of time awoke. The universe was opening its eyes. Ra realized that he could not remain alone if the world was to take shape. Light needed companions. Creation required forces that could give structure to the unfolding cosmos. So Ra began to speak, and with his words, he brought forth new life. His first creations were born from his own being, emerging like thoughts made real. He produced Shu, the god of air, a figure of breath and space, whose presence created movement where there had been none. Shu lifted himself into existence like a rising breeze, gentle but full of endless possibility. From another part of Ra came Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, whose essence lay in every drop of potential that still clung to the waters of none. Tefnut brought balance to Shu, for where there was air, there must also be fluidity. Where there was expansion, there must also be cohesion. Ra watched them with a sense of deep satisfaction. They were not just beings. They were forces, principles of nature that would shape the world alongside him. And as they drifted away to begin their roles, Ra felt the universe evolving. Shu and Tefnut moved through the primordial waters, separating sky from the shapeless void. Their presence introduced contrast into the emptiness, a distinction between above and below. Ra's light illuminated their path, and for the first time, the world had direction. Yet even as the first structures of the cosmos took form, Ra felt an ache. The children he had created had drifted into the vastness, and time passed with no sign of their return. In the age before ages, even gods could feel loneliness, and Ra feared that perhaps they had been lost within the darkness that still lingered beyond his reach. Driven by this fear, Ra sent his eye to search for them. Not his physical eye, but a manifestation of his will, a living extension of his power, burning with divine intensity. This eye traveled across the void, shedding its fierce light into realms untouched by creation. When it finally returned, it brought Shu and Tefnut with it. Their return brought Ra immense relief. From their union another force arose, for creation tends to multiply once it begins. Shu and Tefnut gave birth to Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Geb lay beneath the heavens, his body forming the solid land. Mountains rose from his spine, valleys curved from his contours, and the richness of the soil pulsed with his life. Above him stretched Nut, arched across the sky, her body adorned with stars that glittered like jewels on a vast tapestry. Ra looked upon them with awe. The world was beginning to take shape, and each new being added dimension to the universe. But even in this emerging beauty, there were tensions. Geb and Nut grew so close that they lay locked together, preventing anything from moving between them. Their embrace froze creation's progress. Ra knew that for life to flourish, separation was necessary. With a heavy heart, he commanded Shu, the air, to rise up and push the two apart. Shu obeyed, lifting Nut high into the heavens while Geb remained below as the earth. Their cries echoed through the still young world, but the separation created the space needed for life, seasons, and growth. So the sky stretched above, the earth lay below, and the air filled the space between them. Ra's light illuminated all. The universe had taken shape. The world had a form that could support future generations of gods, beings, and eventually humans. But creation was not finished. From Nut came the birth of other powerful gods. She bore Osiris, the god of life, death, and rebirth. She bore Isis, the goddess of magic and wisdom. She bore Set, the god of storms and chaos, and Nephthys, the guardian of the dead and the night. These gods would shape the destiny of the world in ways even Ra could not fully foresee. But for now, Ra stood as the supreme creator, the one whose light sustained everything. His presence was the heartbeat of existence. However, with creation comes fear. Ra understood that the world he had built was delicate, constantly balancing order and chaos. He realized that if he did not maintain control, the forces he unleashed could turn against the harmony he intended. He chose to rule not only as a creator but as a king. He took his place at the center of the sky within a great solar bark, a celestial boat that carried the sun across the heavens each day. As he traveled, his light nourished the land, warmed the waters, and awakened life. Every sunrise became a reminder of his power. Every sunset became a promise that he would return. But the world was young, and not all forces welcomed his authority. Even among the gods he had made, seeds of conflict began to emerge. Set, the stormbringer, stirred with restlessness, feeling overshadowed by his siblings. Osiris grew wise and compassionate, beloved by both gods and the still-forming world. Isis discovered secrets hidden within creation, learning magic so potent that it rivaled the authority of Ra himself. But for now, as the early days of creation unfolded, Ra remained the center of everything. The world turned because he willed it. The sky glowed because he illuminated it. The gods prospered because he sustained them. Yet deep within the waters of none, darkness still watched. Chaos never disappears completely. And even the greatest of gods must one day confront the forces they emerged from. Ra, in his brilliance, did not yet know that creation would soon challenge him in ways he could never have imagined. He did not yet know that his creations would begin to question his rule, or that the sun itself would be threatened. He simply sailed across the young sky, believing that his light was enough to hold the universe together. But light always casts shadows. And in those shadows, destiny was beginning to stir. Ra continued his journey across the newly formed sky, his radiance stretching across the land and awakening everything it touched. The world beneath him slowly shifted from silent emptiness into a landscape teeming with potential. Mountains shimmered with new heat. Rivers hummed softly as they began to remember their paths. The wind stirred through the vastness, carrying whispers of creation from one corner of the world to another. It was as if the universe was learning to breathe for the first time. Geb, the earth, felt the sun's warmth seep into his surface. This warmth coaxed the first living plants into existence, green strokes against the rich brown of his body. Nut arched above, her star-filled body curving gracefully across the sky. Her presence carried the promise of mystery, for each night she swallowed the sun and each morning she gave birth to him again. This cycle became the heartbeat of existence, a rhythm that the world soon embraced. In these early ages, Ra was revered by all. His light was nourishment, his presence was law, and his power seemed unshakable. But creation does not stop once it begins. Every new form of life introduced new desires, new ambitions, new questions. And even gods, born from divine essence, could not escape the pull of emotion. Ra watched his creation flourish, but he also watched it change. Shu carried the winds that shaped the dunes and cooled the skies. Tefnut released gentle rains that softened the ground and allowed plants to thrive. Geb began to crack open his surface, creating fertile valleys that soon rippled with life. Nut's starry expanse sparkled each night, guiding the newly formed creatures below. The younger gods, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, moved through this landscape with growing confidence. They were not like Ra, who had been self-created and born from total emptiness. They had been shaped by gods who themselves had been shaped, and so they carried within them a different kind of potential, a mix of divine nature and the curiosity that came from witnessing creation rather than being its sole author. Osiris walked the land with compassion, noticing how life responded to his presence. Where he stepped, plants grew taller, and the soil seemed to strengthen. He marveled at the rivers, especially the great one that wound its way through the land like a silver serpent. This river would one day be known as the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, but to Osiris it was simply a wonder, a gift that promised nourishment to all who lived near it. Isis moved with quiet intention. She did not seek admiration or command authority, but she listened. She listened to the winds, to the whispering waters, to the rustling leaves. She began to understand the hidden threads that connected everything, and with that understanding came power. It was Isis who first sensed that knowledge itself was a form of magic. She studied creation not as a daughter of the gods but as a student of the universe, absorbing every secret she could find. Nephthys felt drawn to the edges of existence, to places where light began to fade. She discovered beauty in the quiet stillness of the night and in the mysteries that lurked beneath the surface of life. Her role would one day become essential, guiding the souls of the dead, but for now, she simply wandered, learning the delicate balance between life and darkness. Set, however, was restless. He looked upon the ordered world and felt confined. Where others saw harmony, he saw restriction. Where others saw divine purpose, he saw boundaries that irritated him. The storms he carried within him were not yet released upon the land, but their presence pulsed through him like a distant drumbeat. Even in these early days, Set felt a hunger for something beyond what Ra intended. He felt a desire for challenge, for disruption, for a place where his power could be unleashed without judgment. Ra watched all of this unfold from his solar bark, navigating the sky with authority. Yet he began to sense something beneath the harmony, a subtle shift in the balance of creation. He felt the restlessness of Set, the curiosity of Isis, the growing strength of Osiris. He felt the world becoming aware of itself. This awareness was not inherently dangerous, but it meant that order would one day be tested. Ra understood that creation required more than light. It required guidance, governance, and sometimes discipline. So he established laws for the gods, decrees meant to preserve balance. He created divine order, known as Ma'at, a principle that governed truth, justice, and harmony. Ma'at was not a goddess yet, not a personified being, but an idea. An idea that Ra wanted woven into the very fabric of existence. Yet even with laws in place, Ra sensed that his ruling power would not be eternal. He felt age grow within him, not the mortal age that weakens the body, but an ancient fatigue that settles into the soul. Creating the world had been an act of immense will, and maintaining it demanded constant vigilance. Though he still shone brilliantly, Ra knew that his reign would not last unchanged forever. But before his rule would be challenged from the world above, it was the world below that stirred with danger. The primordial waters of Nun, although quieted by Ra's light, had not vanished. They remained, deep beneath creation, holding secrets and shadows that refused to be forgotten. Among these shadows something began to take shape, something ancient and powerful, something that loathed the light that Ra had brought into existence. This force was Apophis, the great serpent of chaos, born from the darkness that resented creation. Apophis did not rise from the waters to bring balance, nor did he seek to understand the new order. He existed only to undo. To swallow light. To drag the world back into the nothingness that had existed before Ra's emergence. At first, Apophis watched quietly, waiting for the right time to strike. Ra sailed across the sky by day, illuminating the world and keeping darkness at bay. But each night, he traveled through the Duat, the underworld, where Apophis had power. And each night, the serpent attempted to devour him. The earliest battles between Ra and Apophis took place in realms unseen by mortal eyes. They were cosmic struggles, clashes between creation and destruction. As Ra's bark glided through the underworld, Apophis would rise from the dark waters, towering above the boat with jaws wide enough to swallow the sun. But Ra was never alone on this journey. Among those who guarded him was the goddess Sekhmet, fierce and relentless, born from Ra's fury when the world disobeyed him. She stood on the prow of the boat, her lioness form trembling with raw power, ready to tear apart any threat. Beside her was Set, who despite his turbulent nature, became one of Ra's greatest defenders against Apophis. In the underworld, Set found a battleground worthy of his power, and he struck the serpent with thunderous force night after night. Though Apophis was defeated each time, he could never be destroyed entirely. Chaos cannot be erased, it can only be fought back. And so every morning, when Ra emerged victorious and rose once more into the sky, it was a triumph earned through fierce struggle. But these nightly battles drained him more than he admitted. He continued to shine for the gods and the world below, but a quiet exhaustion wound itself around him like an invisible chain. Day after day, creation blossomed under his light, but Ra felt the weight of every sunrise more heavily than the one before. As the world matured, so did its inhabitants. Life began to spread across the land. The riverbanks grew lush, animals roamed the plains, and the first humans appeared, fragile yet full of potential. Ra looked upon them with curiosity. They revered him, raising their arms to the sky each morning, praising the warmth that gave them life. But humans were unpredictable. Their devotion was sincere, yet their actions were often misguided. They could build great structures, but they could also destroy them. They could love deeply, but they could also betray just as easily. They reminded Ra of the younger gods, full of desire and ambition. In the early days, humans respected the divine order. They lived simply, relying on the land and offering gratitude for every blessing. But as time passed, they began to grow confident, sometimes too confident. They questioned the gods. They questioned Ra himself. This displeased Ra deeply. He had given them light, life, and a world to thrive in, yet they dared to defy him. The seeds of rebellion that had once stirred among the gods had now taken root within humanity. Ra felt a mix of anger and sorrow. He had created them to be part of the world's harmony, not to disrupt it. One day, Ra overheard the humans plotting against him. They whispered of finding ways to diminish his power, believing he had grown old and weak. Their insolence ignited a rage within him that he had never known before. He realized that if humans could be so bold, then the order he had worked so hard to maintain was beginning to unravel. Ra decided that he must act. But the decision he made next would change the world forever. Ra listened as the whispers of human rebellion rose through the air like smoke. What began as murmurs soon became bold conversations, filled with doubt, disrespect, and even mockery. The humans he had carefully crafted, nourished with his light, and watched over with unwavering commitment now spoke of him as if he were a fading presence, a ruler who had grown too old to command authority. For the first time since creation began, Ra felt the sting of betrayal. It was not a wound inflicted by Apophis or a challenge offered by another god. This was a wound delivered by beings he had pitied, nurtured, and cherished. The realization that humanity could turn against him shook him deeply. He had created them to be partners in the unfolding of the world, not rebels seeking to undermine the divine order. He withdrew to the heavens, sitting upon his sun-drenched throne, contemplating what should be done. The other gods gathered around him, sensing his unrest. Shu approached with caution, carrying the coolness of the wind as if it might soothe Ra's fury. Tefnut followed, her presence calm and soft, hoping to temper the storm within him. But Ra's anger was not easily eased. He spoke of humanity's disobedience, of their disrespect, and of the danger that their rebellion posed to Ma'at. If humans grew unchecked in pride and irreverence, their chaos would spread like wildfire, consuming the harmony of creation. Something had to be done, and Ra knew he could not show weakness. Not now, when even the cosmos seemed to test the extent of his power. After a long silence, Ra made a decision. He summoned his eye, the very manifestation of his will and divine wrath. This eye, which had once searched for his lost children, would now become an agent of punishment. With a voice filled with thunderous authority, he commanded the eye to descend upon the earth and teach humanity the price of defying the sun god. As the eye separated from him and traveled downward, it transformed. Its gentle radiance twisted into the fierce form of Sekhmet, a lioness goddess whose strength was unmatched, whose ferocity was born of Ra's rage. Sekhmet landed upon the earth with a roar that echoed through valleys and shook mountains. Her golden fur gleamed with the fire of the sun, and her eyes burned with the fury of Ra himself. When the humans saw her, terror gripped their hearts. They realized too late the consequences of their insolence. Sekhmet moved through their settlements with unstoppable power, enforcing Ra's punishment. Wherever she went, the earth trembled beneath her paws. Her breath scorched the ground. Her rage was relentless, and she struck down all who had dared to challenge Ra's authority. Ra watched from the sky, at first satisfied that justice was being carried out. But Sekhmet did not stop. Her fury grew with every moment, feeding on the fear around her. The more humans fled, the more she pursued. Villages emptied, rivers ran red, and the cries of mortals filled the land. What began as a lesson had become destruction on a scale that horrified even the gods. Isis approached Ra with urgency, pleading with him to see what was happening. Humanity was on the verge of annihilation. The balance of the world was unraveling. Even Osiris, filled with compassion for all living things, begged Ra to intervene. But Ra hesitated. He had unleashed Sekhmet to punish humanity, yet he had not anticipated the extent of her hunger for vengeance. Finally, confronted with the devastation unfolding before him, Ra realized that this path could not continue. Humanity might have faltered, but wiping them out entirely would leave a void in creation. The world would lose a crucial part of its design, and the principles of Ma'at would be violated in the opposite direction. Order required balance, not blind destruction. Ra knew he needed to stop Sekhmet, but she was no longer simply an extension of his will. She had become a force of pure wrath, intoxicated by the chaos that spilled across the earth. To confront her directly would ignite a battle that could fracture creation itself. Instead, Ra devised a plan. Sekhmet's rage was powerful, but it was also predictable. She sought blood, and so Ra decided to give her what she craved, but in a way that would disarm her fury. He commanded the finest brewers of the gods to create an enormous quantity of beer. But this beer was no ordinary drink. Ra ordered it to be dyed with red ochre, giving it the appearance of blood. Once the beer was prepared, the gods poured it across the fields where Sekhmet was hunting. The liquid shimmered under the sun, flowing like rivers of crimson. When Sekhmet arrived, she saw what she believed to be an endless expanse of blood, a feast stretching far beyond the horizon. Unable to resist, she lowered her mighty head and drank. She drank deeply, and as she did, the intoxicating brew filled her senses. The more she consumed, the more her rage dissolved into confusion, then into drowsiness. At last, the lioness goddess collapsed upon the earth, her fury subdued. When she awoke, her form had changed. The fierce Sekhmet softened into Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and joy. The same force that once brought destruction now brought celebration and life. Through this transformation, Ra restored balance. Humanity was spared, but they were also humbled, forever reminded of the consequences of challenging the divine. Yet this entire ordeal had drained Ra deeply. The effort to unleash Sekhmet, then to stop her, weighed on him. The rebellion of humans troubled him more than he wanted to admit. As he looked upon the world, he began to feel a distance growing between himself and his creation. He felt old, older than he had ever felt before. The cosmos he had shaped now seemed to thrive without him guiding every moment. The gods gathered once more, sensing the shift within Ra. They noticed how his movements slowed, how his light dimmed ever so slightly. For the first time in their existence, they witnessed the vulnerability of the sun god. Though he was still powerful, something inside him had changed. Ra acknowledged this change and made a decision that would reshape the hierarchy of gods forever. He would not rule the earth as he once had. Instead, he would ascend to the heavens permanently, watching over creation from above rather than walking among it. When he announced his intention, the younger gods listened in stunned silence. The world had always known Ra as the central figure, the creator, the ruler who shaped every dawn and commanded every dusk. The thought of him withdrawing was almost unthinkable. But Ra assured them that this was not abandonment. It was evolution. Just as the world had grown, so too must the gods. Ra would remain the sun, the eternal force illuminating the sky, but the governance of the earth would shift. New leaders would emerge, new stories would unfold, and creation would continue to thrive. Ra prepared for his ascension, and the moment was marked by celestial splendor. His glorious bark rose higher than ever before, lifting him beyond the reach of mortals and even most gods. The sky blazed with brilliance, and the world paused beneath the overwhelming radiance of the departing Creator. As Ra settled into the heavens, becoming the sun that watched from afar, the world exhaled. The gods adjusted to this new order. Humans resumed their lives, carrying a renewed respect for the divine. But the shift in power left room for new dynamics, new rivalries, new conflicts. The younger gods, especially Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, would soon find themselves at the center of unfolding events. Their stories would define the ages to come. But even as their destinies took shape, Ra's presence remained constant. Each sunrise was a reminder that the Creator still watched, still guided, still protected. Even in retirement, Ra's influence could not be surpassed. Yet peace in the divine realm is never permanent. For as soon as one era ends, another begins. And the shadows that had once lingered beneath the waters of Nun were far from finished with the world. With Ra now enthroned in the heavens, the world began to settle into a new rhythm. Each day his light rose across the land, steady and dependable, but his presence felt different. He was no longer the walking king of creation, shaping the world with every step. Instead, he had become the eternal watcher, a distant but powerful guardian whose warmth sustained life without directly ruling it. This change gave the younger gods room to flourish, to take on roles that would shape the future of the world in profound ways. Among them, Osiris quickly emerged as a central figure. His wisdom, compassion, and connection to life made him a natural leader among gods and mortals alike. Under his influence, humanity learned agriculture, rituals, and the beginnings of civilization. They learned how to plant, how to harvest, how to honor the gods, and how to build communities that thrived along the riverbanks. Osiris became a symbol of order and prosperity. Humans looked to him with reverence, grateful for the gifts he shared. Isis stood beside him as a partner, her understanding of magic and hidden knowledge strengthening his rule. Together, they formed a powerful and harmonious union, one that brought stability and hope to the world. But in the shadows of this harmony, Set grew increasingly troubled. He watched the admiration that Osiris received and felt bitterness twist within him. Set had always been a god of storms, chaos, and untamed power. His strength was unparalleled, yet his role remained uncertain in a world that valued calm and balance. He saw Osiris as a rival, someone who represented everything he struggled against. Order. Peace. Predictability. This envy festered like a storm cloud gathering over the desert. What began as silent resentment soon grew into a roaring tempest inside Set's heart. He felt overshadowed not only by Osiris but by all who praised him. Set believed that the world needed strength, not gentle wisdom, and he convinced himself that he alone could rule with the force required to keep chaos at bay. But jealousy is a dangerous seed. Once planted, it takes root, twisting thoughts into dark intentions. Set's mind filled with visions of overthrowing Osiris, of claiming power for himself, of proving that he was the true ruler the world needed. He spent his days plotting, observing Osiris's routines, studying his vulnerabilities, and searching for a moment when he could strike. Meanwhile, life continued peacefully across the land. Osiris traveled from region to region, teaching farmers, blessing fields, guiding kings, and ensuring that the world remained in harmony. Wherever he went, joy followed. Festivals sprang up in his honor, music filled the air, and people celebrated the abundance that his presence brought. Isis watched over everything with a keen eye, sensing that even in times of peace, hidden dangers lurked. Her intuition, deep and mysterious, often alerted her to disturbances long before they became visible. Yet even she could not fully detect the intensity of the storm brewing in Set's heart. Set waited patiently, masking his intentions behind a facade of indifference. But beneath his calm exterior, he crafted a plan so cunning and calculated that it would change the course of history. He decided that the only way to claim power was to eliminate Osiris permanently. To execute his plan, Set chose a moment when Osiris's guard would be down. There was to be a grand celebration, a festival attended by gods and mortals alike. Osiris would be present, surrounded by admirers, joyful and unsuspecting. Set knew this would be the perfect opportunity to strike a blow from which Osiris might never recover. Before the festival, Set prepared an elaborate chest, crafted with exquisite beauty. It was adorned with precious stones, carved with intricate patterns, and polished until it gleamed like the finest treasure the world had ever seen. But the chest was not merely a gift. It was a trap, designed to fit only Osiris's body perfectly. On the day of the festival, Set presented the chest before the gathered crowd, announcing that he would gift it to whoever could fit inside it perfectly. Laughter and excitement rippled through the audience. One by one, the guests attempted to fit into the chest, but each was either too tall, too broad, or too small. Osiris, amused by the spectacle and unaware of Set's intentions, eventually stepped forward. Encouraged by the cheers around him, he lowered himself into the chest. It fit him perfectly, crafted as though it had been made specifically for him. In that instant, Set's demeanor shifted. With a fierce cry, he slammed the lid shut and sealed it tightly. The room erupted into chaos as Set's followers, hidden among the crowd, rushed forward. They carried the chest away before anyone could intervene, Osiris trapped inside, unable to escape. Set took the chest to the river and cast it into the waters. The current carried it away, sweeping it toward the distant sea. Osiris was gone. The moment news of the event reached Isis, her heart shattered. She searched endlessly, following every whisper, rumor, and sign. She traversed forests, deserts, and foreign lands, driven by a love stronger than any force in creation. Eventually, she found the chest lodged near the roots of a great tree in a distant land. She retrieved Osiris's body with trembling hands, her grief overwhelming her. But Set learned of her success. Furious that his plan had not ended with Osiris's permanent disappearance, he confronted Isis and seized the body. In a fit of rage, he tore Osiris into pieces and scattered the fragments across the land, believing that such a fate would make resurrection impossible. This moment marked a turning point in the divine world. Set's betrayal shook the heavens, and even Ra felt the tremors of the unfolding tragedy. Though Ra had retreated into the sky as a distant overseer, he watched the events with sorrow. He saw how the world had been thrown off balance, how fear spread among humans, and how the younger gods struggled with the weight of this loss. Yet even in darkness, hope remained. Isis refused to accept defeat. With unwavering determination, she set out once more to find the scattered pieces of Osiris. Her search was long and exhausting, but with the help of Nephthys, Anubis, and other loyal gods, she recovered nearly every fragment. Through her mastery of magic, Isis reassembled Osiris's body. She performed rituals older than memory, weaving together the threads of life and death. Her love, devotion, and power merged into a force greater than any the world had ever seen. Slowly, Osiris awakened. But he could not return to the world of the living as he once had. The nature of his resurrection placed him in a new role, one that would shape the afterlife for all eternity. Osiris became the ruler of the Duat, the god of the dead, the judge of souls. His story did not end. It evolved. And in this evolution, the world faced new consequences. Set had seized power on earth, claiming rulership with force. Chaos and storms followed in his wake. He believed that strength justified his reign, that fear was a more effective tool than love or wisdom. The gods trembled under his dominion. Humans suffered. Yet the balance of the universe could not allow chaos to triumph unchecked. A successor to Osiris was needed, a god born from both divine strength and the legacy of hope. That successor grew quietly under the protection of Isis, hidden from Set's wrath. His name was Horus. While the story of Horus's rise would one day become legend, Ra continued to watch from the sky, observing how creation unfolded in ways even he had not entirely foreseen. The world he had formed with intention and precision now evolved through conflict, triumph, betrayal, and rebirth. Every god played a part, every mortal influenced the balance, every decision altered the cosmic tapestry. Yet through it all, Ra's presence remained the constant. Every sunrise was a reminder that the Creator still watched, still guided, still brought warmth and order. But even Ra felt a growing distance from the events below. His eternal battle with Apophis continued each night, and the strain deepened his fatigue. He had built a world of complexity, beauty, and contradiction. And creation, once simple, had now become a living narrative shaped by countless wills. But the story of Ra was far from finished. His journey was not only about creation, but about the fragility of power, the evolution of divine purpose, and the ongoing struggle to maintain balance in a world that constantly transformed. And deep beneath the surface, in the endless darkness of none, Apophis stirred once more, waiting for the moment when even the sun god's strength might falter. Ra continued his eternal journey across the sky, watching the changing world below with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The creation he had shaped with purpose had grown into something vibrant and unpredictable. Life flourished in cycles of harmony and conflict. Gods rose and fell in influence. Humans built, destroyed, loved, and feared. The tapestry of existence had become richer than Ra ever imagined, yet more complicated than he ever desired. Each morning, he rose from the horizon in radiant splendor, and each evening, he descended into the underworld, where his nightly battle awaited. The passage through the Duat had always been a challenge, but now, with the weight of the world's shifting balance, the journey seemed even more difficult. Apophis lurked in the depths, swollen with strength born from mortal chaos and divine turmoil. The serpent sensed Ra's fatigue. He sensed the growing weakness in the light he once failed to extinguish. Yet Ra persevered. For all the conflicts in the world above, for all the upheaval sparked by Set's ambition and Osiris's fall, Ra's duty remained unchanged. He guided the sun through the sky because creation depended on it. His presence gave rhythm to time, order to nature, and hope to both mortals and gods. Still, he could not help but feel the shifting tides within the cosmos. With Osiris gone from the world of the living, Set's rule spread across Egypt like a storm. He declared himself rightful ruler and demanded loyalty from all who lived. The winds howled with his rage, and the deserts shook beneath his steps. Storms raged where once gentle breezes had blown. Crops withered under violent weather, and fear took root among humans. But not all bowed to Set. Isis, faithful and clever, hid her son Horus far from Set's reach, nurturing him in secret. She raised him with relentless dedication, teaching him the truths about his father and the destiny that awaited him. Throughout his childhood, Horus learned patience, strategy, and the importance of justice. He was not a god fueled by vengeance alone. He was a god shaped by purpose. Ra observed this from above. He saw Horus grow into a strong and determined young god, his eyes sharp like the falcon he would one day embody. Ra sensed that Horus was the key to restoring balance on earth, yet he remained withdrawn, knowing the younger gods needed to forge their own destiny. Only when necessary would he intervene. Meanwhile, Set's grip tightened. His confidence grew with each passing year, and he boasted of his victory over Osiris. Yet deep inside, he felt the unease of unfinished business. He knew the child of Osiris still lived. He knew Isis was too clever to accept defeat. And he suspected that the gods watched him with silent judgment. Set's paranoia grew like a crack spreading through stone. He became harsher, more unpredictable. The world reflected his turmoil as storms grew fiercer and the desert expanded. People began to pray not only for blessings but for protection from the wrath of the storm god who ruled them. At last, when Horus reached adulthood, he stepped forward to challenge Set. What followed was a series of battles that echoed across the heavens, battles that tested strength, wit, and will. The clash between Set and Horus was not a single confrontation but a long, bitter struggle that lasted years. It unfolded in different forms, each more intense than the last. Sometimes they fought as men, blades clashing under darkened skies. Other times they battled as animals, transforming into beasts that tore across the land in primal fury. The gods watched from above, powerless to intervene except as witnesses or advisors. Some supported Horus, seeing in him the rightful heir of Osiris. Others feared Set's wrath and remained silent. But all felt the earth tremble with each encounter, as if creation itself held its breath. Isis played a crucial role in these conflicts, using her wisdom and magic to guide her son. Yet even she faced challenges that tested her deeply. In one moment of compassion, when Set disguised himself as a helpless figure, Isis freed him, not realizing it was her enemy. Horus, overwhelmed by anger at her mercy, lashed out in frustration. Their relationship strained, yet the purpose remained unwavering. As battles continued, Ra watched carefully from his solar throne. Though distant, he understood that this struggle was not only about the rule of Egypt. It was about restoring the balance that Set had broken. It was about preserving the principles of Ma'at that Ra had woven into creation itself. But Ra hesitated to intervene too soon. He believed the young gods needed to prove themselves, to learn through conflict what it meant to preserve order. Yet the conflict dragged on. Years passed, and the world wavered. Even Ra's nightly battles against Apophis grew more intense as Set's chaos strengthened the serpent. The bond between earthly disorder and cosmic turmoil became clearer. Ra could no longer ignore the weight these struggles placed upon the entire universe. Finally, Ra summoned the gods to a divine tribunal, a judgment that would determine the rightful ruler. For days they debated, listening to testimonies from Horus, Isis, Set, and countless other gods who had witnessed the unfolding events. The outcome was not immediately clear. Set argued fiercely, claiming strength was the measure of a true ruler. Horus argued for justice and lineage. The court wrestled with the complexities of both arguments. At last, Ra made his decision. He declared Horus the rightful king of Egypt, the heir of Osiris, and the one who would restore harmony to the land. Set, defeated but not destroyed, was given a different purpose. He would no longer rule on earth, but he would serve as a protector of Ra during his nightly passage through the underworld. This was a brilliant act of balance. Set's strength and wrath were no longer threats to the world above but became powerful weapons against Apophis. The storm god, stripped of earthly power, now turned his fury against the serpent of chaos. Each night, Set stood on Ra's bark, delivering mighty blows to Apophis as the serpent attempted to swallow the sun. In this new role, Set found a form of redemption. He remained a complex deity, neither wholly evil nor wholly good, but essential to maintaining cosmic order. His chaotic force was now part of the balance itself, a reminder that even the most destructive powers can serve a purpose when guided by necessity. With Horus enthroned on earth, the world entered a new age. Peace began to return. The storms subsided. The Nile flowed with renewed vitality. People rejoiced, celebrating the rightful ruler who brought hope and stability. The story of Osiris, Isis, Set, and Horus became a myth that shaped the consciousness of generations to come. And through it all, Ra continued his eternal cycle, rising each morning, falling each night. Though distant, he remained the foundation of creation. He knew that his world had grown beyond his direct control, but he no longer feared this evolution. He understood that creation was meant to expand, to adapt, to challenge itself. His role had changed, but his presence remained vital. Yet as he soared across the sky, Ra felt the pull of time. Not mortal time, but cosmic time. The time of gods, measured not in years but in the weight of ages. He knew there would come a moment when he could no longer sustain the world as he once had. He felt the fatigue of countless battles, the heaviness of watching creation unfold in unpredictable ways. It was during these thoughts of change that a profound question began to whisper through the cosmos. What becomes of a creator when creation begins to outgrow him? What happens to a god whose power, though immense, must evolve with the universe he set in motion? Ra did not yet know the answer. But the world was shifting again, subtly but unmistakably. New cults were rising among humans. New interpretations of divine purpose were emerging. The younger gods continued to shape culture and meaning. The people's relationships with the divine grew more personal and varied. Ra still ruled the heavens, still battled Apophis, still sustained life. But he sensed that creation was moving toward an era where the gods themselves would adapt, change form, and take on new identities in the hearts of those who worshipped them. And the creator of the world, the great sun god, would soon face a transformation of his own. As the centuries unfolded beneath Ra's golden gaze, the world continued to grow in ways even he had not fully anticipated. Humans adapted to the rising and falling of kingdoms. They created new rituals, new stories, new monuments. The riverbanks blossomed with life, the deserts whispered with ancient winds, and the sky remained a canvas painted anew each dawn by Ra's unyielding light. Yet as humanity changed, so too did their relationship with the gods. They still revered Ra, lifting their faces each morning to greet his warmth. But their eyes often strayed toward the younger gods, whose stories were fresher, whose deeds felt closer to their own struggles. Osiris ruled the underworld with benevolence and justice. Isis's magic and devotion inspired countless followers. Horus, the Falcon King, embodied strength and protection. Even Set, in his new role, commanded a fearsome respect among those who recognized the necessity of chaos in preserving order. Ra understood that this shift was natural. Creation evolves, and so do the hearts of those who inhabit it. But even as he accepted this transformation, he sensed a slow unraveling inside himself, a weariness born from the endless cycle he maintained. Day after day, night after night, he sailed his celestial bark across the sky and through the underworld. For ages beyond counting, he had held the cosmos together, but even the greatest of gods could feel the weight of eternity. During the nights when he drifted through the Duat, the battles with Apophis grew more violent. The serpent had grown monstrous, feeding on the doubts and fears that accumulated in the world above. Every act of human cruelty, every moment of divine discord, every fracture in the principles of Ma'at strengthened him. Apophis twisted through the waters like a shadow made of hatred, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The nightly confrontations had once been predictable, but now Apophis attacked with renewed fury. Sometimes he attempted to coil around the solar bark, squeezing it in an effort to extinguish Ra's light. Other times he launched upward, jaws wide, snapping at the very heart of the sun god's radiance. Ra fought tirelessly, Set roared with violent strength, and the other gods on the bark contributed their spells and weapons. But each victory felt increasingly narrow, as though the balance teetered on the brink of collapse. Ra began to wonder if the world would one day enter an age when the sun might not rise. The thought chilled him more deeply than the coldest waters of the underworld. His entire existence had been built upon the promise of the dawn. Without that promise, the universe would crumble into chaos. And yet, he could no longer deny the creeping weakness that wrapped around his divine essence like invisible vines. Still, he pressed onward, fulfilling his duty without pause. Every sunrise felt like a triumph, yet every sunset felt heavier. He saw the world flourish and falter in cycles that echoed the cosmic movements around him. And though his presence remained constant, Ra felt the growing truth that creation no longer depended solely on him. The younger gods had carved their own roles into existence. They influenced the world in powerful ways that complemented but no longer relied exclusively on his authority. One day, as Ra sailed across the sky, he felt a strange shift within his being. It was not pain or fatigue, but something more profound. Something transformative. His radiance flickered, not outwardly where mortals might see, but inwardly, as though a quiet metamorphosis was beginning. He sensed that a new chapter of existence was approaching, one that would reshape his role in unimaginable ways. Ra descended into the Duat that evening as usual, prepared to confront Apophis. But this night was unlike any before. When the serpent rose from the darkness, its form was larger and more menacing than ever. Its eyes burned with hatred. Its scales rippled with the energy of chaos. And for the first time, Ra felt a surge of vulnerability. Apophis lunged with tremendous force, nearly overturning the bark. Set responded with a roar that split the underworld, striking the serpent's head with such fury that the shockwaves rippled through the waters. Yet Apophis recovered instantly, coiling around the vessel, constricting with deadly intent. The bark groaned, the gods cried out, and Ra felt his light dim dangerously. For a brief moment, darkness closed in. The serpent's jaws pushed toward Ra's blazing form. Time felt suspended. The universe held its breath. Then, from deep within his being, Ra summoned a burst of ancient power. It was not the youthful energy he once commanded with ease but something older, deeper, rooted in the very moment of creation. Light exploded from him in a brilliant flash, forcing Apophis to recoil. Set seized the opportunity, driving his weapon into the serpent's skull. With a thunderous hiss, Apophis sank back into the depths. The bark stabilized. The waters calmed. The gods exhaled. But Ra knew what this battle truly meant. His victory had been too narrow, his strength too drained. For the first time in his eternal existence, he realized he might not always be able to win. When he returned to the sky the next morning, his dawn felt different. It carried a somber, reflective quality. Humans noticed the slightly muted glow, animals sensed the subtle tension, and the gods looked to the horizon with concern. The younger gods gathered, curious and worried about the shift they felt. They approached Ra with reverence, asking what burden weighed upon him. But Ra simply gazed across the world and spoke quietly. He explained that eternity was not a straight path but a series of transformations. Even gods must adapt to the unfolding of cosmic time. The gods listened in silence, their hearts heavy with the understanding that change was inevitable. They wondered what transformations awaited Ra, the one who had been their creator, ruler, and source of all light. In the following days, humans and gods alike began to sense that Ra's light, while still powerful, carried a new quality. It felt wiser, more distant, like the glow of an elder whose presence inspired reverence tinged with melancholy. Priests offered prayers not just of gratitude, but of protection. Statues of Ra received fresh offerings. Temples echoed with rituals meant to strengthen his light. But Ra understood a truth deeper than any of their fears. The world was entering a new age, one that required an evolution of divine presence. Humanity had grown. The gods had grown. And creation itself had become a living symphony of countless forces, no longer dependent solely on one conductor. Nevertheless, the cosmos still relied on Ra. His journey across the sky still defined day and night. His presence still anchored the rhythm of life. But the time was approaching when this role would shift, when fragments of his essence would take new forms, guiding creation in ways more subtle and mystical. Even as this shift loomed, Ra prepared for what he knew would be one of the greatest trials he ever faced. Apophis was not defeated. Chaos was rising. And the question of whether light could continue to overcome darkness lingered like a shadow across the heavens. Creation had begun with Ra's emergence from the waters of none. But the next chapters of existence would test the endurance of his light, the resilience of the world he shaped, and the meaning of creation itself. For even gods, no matter how eternal, must confront the truth that nothing remains unchanged. Ra continued his path across the sky, even as the weight of eternity pressed deeper into his being. The world below him flourished with life, beauty, and growth, but he felt everything more distantly now. What once energized him now seemed to whisper through his essence like fading echoes. Yet he pushed on, determined to maintain the balance he had created, because he understood that his journey was woven into the fabric of existence. As time flowed forward, Ra's cult remained strong among the people. They built tall obelisks that pointed toward him like fingers of devotion. They constructed grand temples, each filled with hymns praising the rising sun. Priests stood on sacred platforms, greeting the dawn with outstretched arms as though welcoming an old friend. These rituals sustained Ra's bond with humanity, but even he felt the subtle shifts in human belief. The world was expanding. The minds of humans were evolving. They told new stories, adopted new interpretations, and sought new meanings in the divine. Ra still reigned as the sun, the eternal observer of all that lived and died. Yet he sensed the people's growing connection to gods who embodied more personal aspects of life and death. Osiris ruled the afterlife with gentle justice. Anubis guided souls with unwavering care. Horus protected kings and nations. Isis offered love, wisdom, and healing. Even Set, though feared, had become a symbol of necessary strength in times of chaos. Ra did not begrudge the shifting devotion. He had always known the world would grow beyond its beginnings. Creation was meant to unfold in layers, each new age adding depth and complexity. But deep inside, he felt a reminder of his ancient solitude, the same solitude he felt at the dawn of existence as he rose from the waters of none. It was not loneliness. It was reflection. A recognition that creation had moved into realms where even he no longer walked directly. Yet for all the changes unfolding around him, the battle with Apophis remained. Each night, Ra descended into the underworld, preparing again for the confrontation that defined cosmic order. Apophis had grown more cunning. Instead of attacking with brute force alone, the serpent began weaving illusions, attempting to confuse or weaken Ra's companions. Sometimes the serpent created whirlpools of shadow that distorted the path. Other times, he summoned tidal waves of darkness that threatened to overturn the bark entirely. Set continued to fight by Ra's side, delivering blow after blow with unparalleled ferocity. His roars echoed through the Duat, shaking even the oldest spirits. In these battles, Set served with unwavering loyalty. Whatever chaos lived inside him found purpose in protecting the sun god from the even greater chaos of Apophis. It was a divine paradox, one that Ra understood with deep clarity. A force of disorder had become essential to preserving order. Balance had found its own strange equilibrium. Still, each victory came at a cost. Ra felt the drain after every encounter. His nightly journey left him more fatigued with each passing cycle. Even the gods who stood beside him noticed the diminishing spark in his movements. They could not fathom a world without his light, yet they sensed the possibility that one day, his strength might falter. The gods gathered in private realms, speaking in hushed tones about the future. They debated what might occur should Ra's power diminish too far. They wondered how the cosmos would adapt. But although these conversations carried fear, they also carried hope. The gods believed that creation would always find a way to sustain itself. Ra had taught them that order was not a single act but a constant unfolding. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity continued to build monuments to Ra's glory. Pharaohs identified themselves as his descendants, believing the sun god's divine power flowed through their blood. They constructed vast temples aligned precisely with the path of the sun, designed so that the morning rays would illuminate sacred statues in golden light. Every year, festivals celebrating Ra filled the land with music, incense, and prayer. Yet, Ra felt an undeniable truth rising within him. His role was evolving, just as creation had evolved. He would always be the sun, but he would no longer be the central figure walking among gods and mortals. He understood this shift not with sadness, but with acceptance. Creation required change, and he had always embraced the necessity of balance. During a particularly difficult night journey through the underworld, Apophis launched an attack unlike any before. With a sudden surge, the serpent rose from the waters, glowing with monstrous intensity. The waves churned violently, threatening to pull the bark into the depths. The air thickened with darkness, and even the gods on board felt fear coil around them like cold chains. Apophis lunged at Ra with terrifying speed, his jaws opening wide enough to consume the entire vessel. But before he could strike, Set leaped forward, placing himself between Ra and the serpent. The battle that followed shook the underworld. Set and Apophis clashed in a storm of chaos and fury. Lightning burst from Set's strikes, illuminating the cavernous darkness. Apophis retaliated with swirling currents of shadow that wrapped around Set, dragging him downward. Ra summoned his light, aiding Set with beams of radiance that sliced through the serpent's coils. The gods on board chanted spells, adding their strength to the battle. The struggle lasted longer than any before, pushing everyone to their limits. At last, Set delivered a final devastating blow. Apophis recoiled, retreating into the depths with a painful hiss. But the cost was evident. Set fell to his knees, exhausted. Ra's glow dimmed visibly, flickering like a flame battling a sudden gust of wind. That night, as the bark continued its journey, Ra knew he could not sustain this fight forever. Apophis was not weakening. If anything, the serpent was growing stronger as the ages unfolded. Ra's power, once limitless, now faced the pressure of unending turmoil. When dawn broke the next morning, Ra rose, but his movements were slower, his radiance slightly muted. Though the humans did not fully grasp the change, the gods could see it clearly. They approached him with concern, asking what they could do to lighten his burden. Ra spoke gently, acknowledging their loyalty and devotion. But he explained that the cycle of creation was reaching a point where change must come. The world had matured. The gods had matured. It was time for him to begin transitioning into a new form of existence, one that would preserve his essence while allowing creation to continue evolving. The gods did not understand fully, but they sensed the gravity of his words. They realized that Ra was preparing not for death, for gods do not die as mortals do, but for transformation. A shedding of one identity and the emergence of another. Something ancient, powerful, and profound. Meanwhile, humans continued their lives, unaware of the cosmic shift approaching. They prayed, harvested, built, and dreamed. Children laughed in the sunlight. Elders sat beneath palm trees, telling stories of the gods. Life flowed forward, anchored by the presence of the sun. Ra watched all of this with deep affection. He felt pride in what creation had become. He felt gratitude for the beings who had shaped the world alongside him. And though he felt the fatigue of countless ages, he also felt a quiet peace. But the darkness of Apophis still waited in the shadows of the underworld, gathering strength, preparing for yet another confrontation. The balance was shifting, and Ra knew that the time was soon approaching for him to enact the transformation that would redefine his place in the cosmos. The creation of the world had begun with Ra rising from the waters of none. But the continuation of the world would soon depend on how he embraced the next evolution of his divine existence. Ra continued his eternal journey across the heavens, holding the world together with the rhythm of sunrise and sunset. But deep within him, the sense of change grew heavier with each passing cycle. He felt the cosmos shifting around him, not in sudden jolts, but in subtle movements, like the slow turning of an ancient wheel. Creation was maturing, stretching into new realms of meaning, and Ra could feel the pressure this placed on his aging essence. He watched the world below with a mixture of pride and contemplation. Great cities had risen along the riverbanks. Humans had learned to write their stories on papyrus, to carve their devotion into stone, to track the movements of stars as though deciphering the language of the gods. They honored Ra with towering obelisks and sacred temples, but they also revered the younger gods with a closeness that reflected their own human experiences. Ra understood this shift. He saw the growing complexity of belief and recognized that creation was no longer a simple symphony with himself as the lone conductor. It had become an orchestra of countless voices. This understanding did not diminish him. Rather, it revealed a new truth. His original form, the form that had risen from the waters of none, had carried him through ages of creation, battles, guidance, and transformation. But now, the world required something different. The age of walking among gods and mortals was passing. A new kind of divinity would soon be needed, one grounded in endurance rather than youthful force, in ancient wisdom rather than direct command. Meanwhile, each night continued to test the sun god in ways that eroded even his divine strength. The descent into the Duat had become more treacherous, each journey a trial that pushed him closer to the limits he had never imagined existed. Apophis writhed through the shadows like an endless nightmare, growing stronger with the imbalance of the world above. Every conflict on earth, every argument among gods, every moment of human despair fed the serpent's power. One night, the battle reached a level of intensity that shook even the eternal river of the underworld. The serpent emerged from the depths at a size unmatched in previous ages. Waves towered like walls, crashing against the solar bark. Darkness wrapped around the gods, choking the very air they breathed. Ra felt the serpent's presence like a weight pressing down on his soul, as though Apophis sought to smother his light from within rather than through brute force alone. Apophis lunged, jaws wide enough to swallow the horizon. The bark reeled under the impact. The god staggered. Even Set, usually a pillar of ferocity, braced himself against the force. With thunderous rage, Set struck the serpent, but Apophis did not recoil as he once had. The serpent countered with coils of shadow, wrapping around Set with crushing pressure. The storm god growled, fighting back, but Apophis held him firmly. Ra summoned his radiance, sending beams of pure creation into the serpent's coils. The light pierced Apophis, causing him to release Set, but the effort drained Ra deeply. For a moment, the sun god's form flickered like a flame in a windstorm. As the serpent retreated into the waters, defeated for the moment, the gods rushed to steady Ra, sensing how fragile his strength had become. When dawn arrived, Ra rose, but the world felt the shift. Humans looked toward the sunrise with confusion, sensing something unspoken. The sky seemed quieter, the light slightly dulled, as though the sun had aged in a single night. Priests noticed the subtle change more clearly, whispering prayers with heightened urgency. The gods gathered once again, concerned. They looked to Ra not merely as their king, but as the essence of their existence. They feared what might come if his light diminished too far. Some suggested lending him their strength. Others proposed altering the cosmic order to lessen his burden. But Ra, calm and steady, told them that the time for transformation had come. He explained that the world had grown more layered than it was at the dawn of existence. Humans had developed beliefs that connected different aspects of divinity, merging them into new identities. Ra himself had begun to merge in the hearts of mortals with other solar gods, such as Adam, the ancient creator, and Khepri, the god of the dawn who symbolized rebirth through the image of the scarab beetle. Ra realized that these evolving interpretations were not errors or confusions, but signs of creation's progression. The people saw the sun not as a single state, but as a cycle. At dawn, it was rebirth. At midday, it was dominance. At dusk, it was wisdom. These were not contradictions, they were the natural expressions of a cosmic truth. Ra was not one form. He was a journey. He understood then that his transformation would not mean abandoning his role, but expanding it. He would become more than the radiant king who rose from none. He would become a god whose identity encompassed the entire cycle of the sun. A god who represented creation, growth, decline, and renewal. His essence would continue through different forms, guiding creation through the rhythm of time. But such a transformation demanded something profound. It demanded that Ra release the identity he had held from the dawn of existence. He would have to surrender the form that had defined him for ages, allowing it to merge with the deeper truth of his cosmic purpose. As this realization settled within him, Ra felt a strange peace wash over him. He no longer dreaded the future. He accepted it. Creation had always been a process of change, and he was part of that process. He understood that his evolution would strengthen the world, not weaken it. His transformation would ensure that the sun's power would endure through ages yet to unfold. Still, the challenge of Apophis remained. Chaos could not be allowed to prevail during this transition. Ra prepared himself for what he knew would be one of the most critical battles of his existence. Before becoming something new, he needed to ensure that the order of the universe could withstand the shift. On the night before the transformation, Ra entered the Duat with solemn determination. The gods on the bark sensed the gravity of the moment and stood ready. Set's eyes glowed with fierce resolve. Others chanted spells of protection, their voices blending into a symphony of divine unity. Apophis emerged almost instantly, as though sensing this would be the night he had long awaited. His form towered higher than ever before. His body crackled with chaotic power, each scale glowing like a shard of darkness. The river of the underworld churned violently, and the very walls of the Duat trembled. In a surge of fury, Apophis hurled himself toward the bark, determined to devour Ra once and for all. The vessel shook under the force. The gods braced themselves. Set roared and rushed forward, meeting the serpent head-on. Magic and weaponry clashed with shadow and chaos in a battle that illuminated the underworld with shifting bursts of light. Ra rose from his throne on the bark, his form glowing not with youthful brilliance, but with ancient, deep-burning power. He stepped forward, his eyes filled with purpose. For the first time in ages, Ra did not fight with the determination of sustaining what he was. He fought with the acceptance of what he was becoming. Light erupted from him in waves, colliding with the serpent's darkness. The clash filled the Duat with a cosmic thunder that echoed across realms. Apophis writhed under the impact, his body twisting violently as the ancient light struck him. But the serpent did not retreat. He lunged again, jaws snapping shut inches away from Ra's essence. Set hurled himself into the fray, striking Apophis with a force that split the waters. The gods unleashed their power, each contributing to a storm of divine resistance. At last, in a moment that shook existence, Ra summoned the full breadth of his ancient creation energy. It flowed out of him like a tidal wave of light, crashing into Apophis with explosive force. The serpent recoiled, shrieking, and sank back into the depths. The battle was won. But Ra knew that this victory marked the end of an era. When he emerged at dawn, the light he cast across the world felt different. It was softer, wiser, and filled with a quiet mystery. Humans felt a shift in the morning air, a sense that the sun carried a deeper story than ever before. Ra prepared for the transformation that would redefine him, the shift that would carry his essence into an eternal cycle of rebirth and endurance. The world was ready. And so was he. The night after Ra's victory over Apophis felt different from every night that had come before it. The energies of the Duat shifted as though the underworld itself sensed what was approaching. The gods aboard the solar bark watched Ra closely, sensing a profound stillness in him, a stillness not born of weakness but of transition. He did not shine with the fierce brilliance of a warrior. Instead, his light carried a deep serenity, the calm that precedes transformation. Ra took his place at the center of the bark, gazing into the dark river that flowed beneath them. The waters shimmered faintly, reflecting his golden form in soft ripples. He felt the pull of cosmic time moving through him, urging him toward the change he had long postponed. The world above was ready for a new phase. The gods were prepared to carry out their roles without relying solely on him. Humanity had grown into civilizations capable of shaping their own destinies. Ra, too, was ready. As the bark ascended toward the horizon, where darkness meets dawn, Ra gathered the gods around him. He spoke in a voice filled with warmth, gratitude, and the echo of ages. He told them that his transformation would not mean the end of his presence. The sun would still rise. Light would still shine. Order would still endure. But the form in which he existed would evolve into something more fluid, more expansive, more eternal than the singular identity he had carried since creation began. The gods listened with reverence. Some felt sorrow, knowing they were witnessing the final moments of Ra as they had always known him. Others felt awe at the magnitude of the cosmic shift unfolding before them. Set bowed his head in uncharacteristic silence. Isis watched with solemn understanding. Thoth, god of wisdom and writing, memorized every word Ra spoke, knowing that this transformation must be preserved for all of time. As dawn approached, Ra felt the moment arrive. His essence stirred like a sun preparing to burst into new life. The bark reached the horizon, and for a breathless moment, it paused as if the entire world held still, waiting for what would come. Then, Ra allowed himself to change. His divine form began to glow brighter, expanding into a radiance so intense that even the gods had to step back. His body dissolved into pure light, shimmering with gold, red, and brilliant white. It was not destruction. It was transcendence. The light curled into itself, swirling in patterns that reflected the cycles of the sun. At dawn, he was Khepri, the scarab who pushes the sun into existence. At midday, he was Ra, the blazing orb ruling the heavens. At dusk, he was Adam, the elder who moves toward the horizon with the wisdom of all he has seen. These forms merged within the transformation, weaving into a unity that reshaped his essence. Ra was no longer a single god with a single identity. He became the cycle itself. The eternal movement of day into night and night into day. The endless circle of creation, endurance, decline, and renewal. As the transformation completed, the light condensed into a new form, radiant and powerful, yet deeply ancient. When the glow settled, Ra appeared not as the solitary ruler he had once been, but as a god of the complete sun cycle. His presence felt broader, more complex, more timeless. The gods fell to their knees, awed by the magnitude of what they witnessed. From the horizon, the newly transformed sun rose, glowing with a brilliance that felt familiar yet profoundly evolved. Humans looked toward the sky, sensing something sacred in the dawn. The air carried a new clarity, a feeling that the world had shifted into a higher harmony. Priests raised their arms, chanting hymns with overwhelming emotion, though they did not yet understand the transformation that had unfolded in the divine realm. Ra's new form ascended into the sky, illuminating everything with a profound truth. He had not diminished. He had expanded. He had become the cycle that defined life itself. As Ra resumed his journey across the heavens, the gods gathered in a sense of renewed purpose. The world felt stable again. Set continued his role as protector of the bark during the nightly passage through the Duat. Isis and Horus nurtured the balance of the earth. Osiris ruled the afterlife with wisdom, offering guidance to souls as they journeyed beyond. Thoth ensured that every shift in divine order was recorded with meticulous care. The harmony of creation began to restore itself. Yet even in this new era, Apophis remained. Chaos cannot be destroyed, only pushed back, only confronted. The serpent lurked in the depths of the underworld, wounded but far from defeated. He sensed Ra's transformation with frustration, realizing that the shift had only reinforced the sun's endurance. The battle between order and chaos would continue, not as a final war, but as a cosmic rhythm that defined existence. Ra accepted this eternal struggle. It was no longer a burden but a part of the cycle he now embodied. Each night he would descend into the Duat, guiding the sun through darkness. Each morning he would emerge renewed, reborn, strengthened by the cosmic truth that creation is a constant balance between opposing forces. As the centuries passed, Ra's story spread across the world through myths, carvings, scrolls, and temples. Humans looked to the sun not only as a source of warmth but as a symbol of resilience and rebirth. They told stories of Ra's battles, his transformation, and his harmonious coexistence with the other gods. They understood that the sun's journey represented their own lives, filled with moments of growth, struggle, decline, and renewal. Ra watched humanity evolve, building kingdoms, developing arts, exploring sciences, and questioning their place in the universe. He took pride in their curiosity, for he knew creation was never meant to be static. Each time humans gazed at the sunrise, they unknowingly honored his transformation. Each time they watched the sun set, they acknowledged the cycle he had become. As time unfolded into new eras, Ra's influence began to appear in ways beyond traditional worship. Artists carved his image onto obelisks that pierced the sky. Priests offered daily hymns, celebrating the moment of dawn as a sacred rebirth. Philosophers explored the meaning of cycles in the universe, drawing inspiration from the sun's perpetual return. Even after new dynasties rose and others fell, Ra's symbolism endured. The gods themselves began to sense that creation had reached a stability that allowed them to guide the world with greater ease. Ra was still the anchor of cosmic order, but he no longer needed to intervene directly in earthly affairs. His presence had become more foundational, woven into the very laws of nature. Yet Ra did not withdraw entirely. He watched. He learned. He adapted. He guided the world subtly, through the gentle shift of the seasons, the path of light across the sky, the rhythm of sunrise and sunset. He was no longer the god who walked upon the earth. He was the cycle that made the earth possible. Nothing could completely erase the challenges of existence. Even with harmony restored, humanity faced new trials. Floods, droughts, conflicts, questions of morality and meaning. And every night, Apophis attempted once again to swallow the sun, reminding creation that darkness always seeks opportunity. But the people learned from Ra's myth. They learned that light returns no matter how deep the darkness. They learned that setbacks are part of the cycle, not the end of it. They learned that resilience is divine. And as the world evolved, Ra's story evolved with it. Throughout generations, tales of his creation, battles, wisdom, and transformation were told by storytellers, priests, and scholars. Some stories became elaborate rituals. Others became inspirations for art and architecture. And some became metaphors for the human experience itself. Ra watched all of this from his place in the heavens, content in the knowledge that his creation continued to grow, adapt, and thrive. He had risen from the waters of none to bring light into the void. He had shaped the cosmos with intention and will. He had ruled with strength, battled chaos, faced betrayal, and embraced transformation. And now, he existed as something more eternal than form. He existed as the cycle of life. He existed as the sunrise that promises new beginnings. He existed as the sunset that whispers of rest. He existed as the heartbeat of the world. And though the gods would continue writing their own stories through time, Ra remained the foundation upon which all creation rested. The sun god, the creator, the transformer, the eternal force who turned the chaos of none into a world of infinite possibilities. And his light, ever ancient and ever new, continued to shine. As ages flowed into ages, the world continued to shift like the sands of the great desert, shaping new civilizations and new ways of understanding existence. Ra watched all of it with a wisdom that stretched beyond time. He had become more than the first creator. He had become the cycle of all creation, the eternal pulse of life woven into the rhythm of the cosmos itself. His transformation had allowed the world to evolve freely, guided by a divine balance that carried the imprint of his earliest intentions. Humans built great temples to honor him, carving his form into obelisks that rose from the earth like spears of sunlight. They painted his story in tombs, spoke his name in prayers at dawn, and aligned their monuments to capture the moment when the sun crowned the horizon. Yet even as they worshipped him, they found their lives shaped by the stories of other gods as well. Osiris, Isis, Horus, Hathor, Thoth, Anubis, Set. Each deity played a role in their understanding of the world, weaving a network of divine connections that helped them interpret the mysteries of life, death, love, justice, and rebirth. But Ra remained the constant thread. He was the light upon which all stories unfolded. Without him, the gods would lose their stage. Without him, humans would lose their days. Without him, creation would lose its anchor. Throughout the centuries, storytellers gathered children in courtyards to recount the myths of the gods. Scribes documented these tales in papyrus rolls that scholars would later unravel and study. Priests recited hymns every morning, praising the sun's rise as a miracle renewed each day. Farmers greeted the dawn with gratitude for another day of life. Sailors navigated by the sun's path. Artists captured its brilliance in golden pigments. Ra's influence did not diminish. It evolved. And as it evolved, Ra watched humanity rise into new levels of understanding. He saw their expansions in architecture, science, language, and law. He saw their pursuit of knowledge lead them to study the stars with precision, discovering patterns that mirrored the cosmic order he had set in motion. They learned the seasons, the cycles of the Nile, the movement of the heavens. They began to understand that creation was not random. It followed principles that could be observed, interpreted, and respected. Humans began to build societies that mirrored the balance Ra had always intended. They created laws to uphold justice. They formed communities that supported one another. They developed moral philosophies that echoed the ancient principle of Ma'at. Even as wars and conflicts arose, even as kingdoms fell and new rulers ascended, humanity preserved a thread of hope, believing in renewal, rebirth, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. These values were not merely cultural. They were reflections of Ra's own story. Humans had absorbed the lesson of the sun cycle. They understood that darkness, though inevitable, is never final. They learned that despair can be a passing night, one that eventually gives way to morning. They came to believe that every fall carries within it the seed of rising again. Ra, from his place in the heavens, felt the beauty of this understanding. The myth of his creation had grown into a metaphor for all of life. His emergence from the waters of Nun became a symbol of new beginnings. His battles with Apophis became symbols of the challenges every soul must face. His transformation into a god of cycles reflected the truth that existence itself is a flow of moments, shifting constantly but always moving forward. As later civilizations rose from the ashes of earlier ones, Ra's presence continued to echo through culture. When new beliefs emerged, they absorbed his symbolism. When new philosophies developed, they captured aspects of his cosmic meaning. Even when his name was spoken less often, the essence of what he represented remained deeply rooted in human imagination. Artists across ages painted suns with radiant faces, embodying the warmth and watchfulness of the ancient god. Poets wrote verses of dawn as a messenger of hope. Priests in different lands carried torches symbolizing divine light, unknowingly echoing the first creation myth of Ra emerging from the void. Scholars crafted theories of cosmic origins, reflecting the same desire to understand existence that Ra's myth had once sought to answer. The sun became one of humanity's most enduring symbols. A symbol of knowledge, of clarity, of order, of life. People across continents revered the rising sun as a moment of renewal, an act of creation repeated daily. They did not need to know Ra's name to honor his essence. The spirit of his myth had infused itself into the human experience. Ra watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. His purpose had never been domination. It had been illumination. He had created not just a world, but a framework for understanding it. His myth lived not because people feared him, but because they recognized themselves within his story. Every person who faced hardship carried a piece of Ra's struggle through the Duat. Every person who overcame darkness embodied his return at dawn. Every person who transformed through the trials of life walked the same spiritual path that Ra himself traveled when he embraced his rebirth. Over time, even the gods felt the influence of Ra's transformation. They adapted their roles as humanity evolved. Some gods became symbols of ideas rather than literal beings. Others found their stories merging with new interpretations. Yet all remained connected through the cycle Ra had established. They continued to protect, guide, and inspire, even as their forms shifted across centuries of storytelling. The myth of Ra became a reminder that creation is not a single moment, but an ongoing act. A reminder that everything changes, yet everything continues. A reminder that even gods must grow, evolve, and transform, just as humans do. And so, as the world moved through countless ages, Ra persisted. The serpent Apophis continued to rise each night, seeking to devour the sun. And each night, Ra met him with the strength of renewal, supported by the gods who traveled with him. Their nightly battle became the invisible heartbeat of the universe, sustaining the cosmic order that allowed life to flourish. Every sunrise that followed was a testament to resilience. A declaration that creation would not yield to chaos. A promise that no matter how dark the night, the sun would return. Ra no longer questioned the meaning of his existence. He had transformed from creator into cycle, from ruler into rhythm, from solitary god into eternal symbol. The world did not need him to speak directly. It needed only to feel his presence in the warmth of morning. Humans continued to gaze at the sun with wonder, gratitude, and reverence, carrying forward traditions inspired by ancient tales. Children listened to stories of the sun god who had once walked the earth. Elders passed down myths of the god who had shaped the cosmos and become its eternal guardian. And somewhere between the horizon and the heavens, Ra watched with a timeless understanding, content in the knowledge that his story had become part of every beating heart that lived beneath his light. For he had given the world not only its beginning, but its rhythm. Not only its order, but its meaning. Not only its warmth, but its hope. Creation had begun when Ra emerged from the waters of Nun. And creation continued every time the sun rose again, carrying forward the light that would outlast generations, kingdoms, and ages. Ra endured. Not in form, but in essence. Not in temples alone, but in the soul of the world. And every dawn, as the sky glowed gold and the darkness retreated, the universe whispered the same story it had told since the beginning. Light returns. Life renews. The cycle continues. And Ra, eternal as the sun itself, rises once more.